Welcome to the Elaborate Topics podcast, where we focus on lab-specific strategies for medical laboratory professionals. We're proud to be the healthcare detectives that work behind the scenes to get the results needed to influence medical decisions. Let's grow together and jump right into the lab.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Elaborate Topics. I'm your host for today's show, Stephanie Whitehead. For those of you tuning in for the first time, I'm your podcasting laboratory leader and co-host of Elaborate Topics podcast. The Elaborate Topics podcast is a weekly podcast where myself and my co-hosts, Taiwana Wilson and Lona Small, bring you topics related to the laboratory and leadership that will help you excel inside and outside of the laboratory. So I'm excited for today's show because I have a very special guest and personal friend of mine, Miss Kendra Lange.
Hello.
Hi, thank you for joining me today.
I am so excited for this. I think this is going to be great. I am such a fan of what you guys have already done with the crowd that you have that subscribes and listens to these podcasts. But I also love that it is healthcare specific, not healthcare specific, applicable to all sorts of folks that run around in the circles that our lab folks might be socializing and networking with. So I'm excited for this.
Well, I'm excited that you're joining me today, and I'm super excited because we've got a great topic. The topic of today's podcast is a case of the just us. And we all know a case of the justice. I'm just a lab tech. I'm just a phlebotomist. And so today in our podcast, we really want to give you the keys to try to master your career development. If you're in a place where you feel like you're stuck or you feel like you want to take your career to the next level, Kendra is here to give you the keys to master how to move forward. But first, you've had an amazing journey in healthcare, and you've got an incredible track record. And you're also a well-known speaker. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the talks that you've given and some of the venues you've spoken at previously?
Yeah, so to be a speaker, since we're into this whole career development scenario and subject, to be a speaker really doesn't take any sort of magical wand or magical kind of personality traits. Everybody has something to talk about, so I just focused in on how I wanted to have an impact, and so I just started speaking. I speak at church events, mainly women's ministry kind of type events, professional geared healthcare specific kind of venues related to accreditation and quality. But the most impactful event that I have spoken at to date is definitely an event that's called I Feel Pretty Women's Conference. And that took place here in Texas about a year ago. It was just such a diverse group of women, and I felt so privileged to be able to be a part of it. It was really incredible how the speakers were just a great mix of women with different topics, and the venue was just intimate enough to feel the energy but still accommodate a pretty substantial group. So I really kind of decided that, this is something I want to do. It's totally worth the scare factor, because don't get me wrong, no matter how many times that you speak in front of large groups or have any sort of public speaking engagements, whether it be, in your organization or with outside groups, it's still daunting every time. So you don't ever get over that, I don't think. But yeah, it's been a great journey for sure.
I love the title, I Feel Pretty. That sounds like an awesome conference.
Yeah, it was great. It's actually the name of a nonprofit as well, and so they just translated that into their conference, and it was really about focusing in on what makes you feel pretty on the inside. And while there's such a focus in our society on how you look on the outside, to really tune that into what makes you feel pretty as an individual.
That's awesome. And so you've had a very lengthy career in healthcare. Why don't you give us some of your background and all the things you've done?
Absolutely. So we'll get into kind of the nitty-gritty, but I started off my healthcare career as a unit secretary and a nurse aide, and then from there I moved into kind of the lean PI world in that same organization, and then went into quality and performance improvement, and then from there moved into more compliance-specific roles, and then moved into kind of regulatory accreditation. So it has definitely been an evolution. I cannot say that I've ever been, or that I'm stuck in my career for sure. Have there been times where I felt stuck? Absolutely, absolutely. But there's always been a next step, whether it was when I wanted it to happen or when it was unexpected. And, I'm sure you as well as the audience can kind of relate to, wanting things to happen in your own time. And that's definitely been a struggle of mine, being kind of an OCD controlling type person. I want to control when things happen and how they happen, but it's definitely been an adventure in the evolution of how I've gotten to where I have. And I'm super blessed, and, being able to focus on what I want out of my career and having the support around me to make it happen, I think has been absolutely necessary.
I think your background to me is really just the best expertise in terms of this title in career development, because you've kind of continuously taken advantage of all of the opportunities in the healthcare arena, and continue to develop yourself and continue to really polish and continue to excel. And so me and you were talking in preparation for this podcast episode, and we talked about, right now, speaking of next steps, people who are frontline workers right now and how they may be considering, what they're doing and how they're doing it, and maybe considering needing to, continue to escalate their career and move up and move forward. And we kind of talked about how, just based on all of the events of 2020, COVID-19, et cetera, the definition of frontline worker expanding. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And what a season this is, right, in our lives. I would kind of joke in the beginning of, back in March, I'd say, oh gosh, what a time to be alive. Who thought 2020 would be so eventful in all the wrong ways, but in all the wrong ways. But I have really kind of tried to latch on the positive things that may come out of this year, and I think that's kind of what keeps me from kind of getting in a funk, right, about what all crazy things have happened, is to focus on, well, what good is coming out of it. And one of those things is, how the definition of a frontline worker has really expanded through this whole COVID-19 season. And, initially or previously, I think as a society, we've really focused on the first responder aspect of healthcare, and the doctors and nurses that you see in all the TV shows that are standing at the ER doors waiting for the ambulance to arrive. That's what we think of in terms of healthcare, just as outsiders, and for very good reason. But the pandemic really necessitated an expansion of how the general public kind of sees these key players and how they keep our society going, which, as everybody knows, brought about this new-ish term of essential worker. And I think we have to keep in mind that essential worker doesn't diminish by any means the role of the first responders, but I think as a society we've gotten a better glimpse of how medical care involves so much more than the doctors and the nurses. It includes the lab techs, the EVS folks, the transporters, the unit secretaries, the CNAs, all of these people that help to make a hospital function, the facilities folks. There has been such a shift in normal responsibilities of everyone in the hospital and these healthcare organizations because of COVID-19, and it's all vitally important to being able to treat patients. And I think that became more evident through this whole pandemic phase that we're in right now.
I agree with you. I think I've always thought that it takes an entire care team. And I think perhaps because my career has always been in the support department, so laboratory department, like radiology, just like pharmacy, just like physical therapy, supporting clinicians in making the diagnosis and treating and discharging and caring for their patients. I've always felt like, it takes an entire care team. And I love that you kind of mentioned it takes the volunteers, it takes the food and nutrition staff, it takes the environmental services staff or the housekeepers, whatever you call them, wherever you work, to kind of keep the wheels going and making sure that all of the patients have the best care possible. And so the title of the podcast is A Case of the Just Us, where you have sometimes people have a mentality of I'm just X, Y, and Z. And why do you think it's important for people who work in healthcare today, especially through this pandemic in 2020, not to minimize their roles by using the statement, I'm just X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, for sure. I've really been stuck on this whole just a thing for a while, for years now. And I'll tell you why. And you and I kind of, again, have similar backgrounds in that we've, as part and parcel of our careers, had supportive roles within healthcare. I have always been very, very close to the nurses that I've worked with by virtue of my role. And I think that that's kind of helped to give me a unique perspective into both worlds. But I think within the hospital, within the healthcare system, there's such a focus on doctors and nurses. We sometimes tend to say, well, I'm just, fill in the blank, because we have such strict scopes of practice for all of us to kind of make sure that we're doing what we need to do. A CNA can't pass meds, a lab tech can't change out IV fluids, or ultrasound techs can't give an actual diagnosis to a patient, even though all of these people may absolutely be, physically and mentally capable of doing those things. It's not within their scopes of practice, but which is completely, understandable. But I think that it has also evolved into a mentality that we tend to kind of carry with us, right? It becomes part of who we are. I'm just a this, whereas it's not a what I do. Like I can't give a med. I can't do this, instead of, well, this is my role. This is how I support the care of the patient. And to that end, we all have a part to play in order to give the best possible care to our patients. And I laugh about this because of my role. So, even the dreaded surveyors, right, that everybody tends to kind of not be very fond of. In my previous role as a surveyor, I saw that it was my responsibility to the members of that community, wherever I was that week, to help ensure that hospital I was visiting was doing the absolute best that they could to improve patient care. And notice I didn't say provide perfect care, but to improve what they were currently doing. And that was really my goal in that role, is to really focus on how are they doing now, and how can they get better, and how can I help to make that happen so that this community benefits from it. So yeah, we all absolutely have a part to play. And there's never such a thing as I'm just a this. And kind of to that end, the reason why this kind of came back, I won't say to haunt me, but the case of the justice came back with a vengeance one day when I was surveying. Now, you heard me mention I got my start in healthcare as a unit secretary and a nurse aide. So I absolutely would find myself kind of suffering from the justas. And that being said, being a unit secretary was absolutely one of my favorite jobs that I've had in my career, just because I loved what I did. I saw value in it, but I still would kind of have that moment of, gosh, like I feel like I'm being walked on today, or I feel like I can't do enough, or those types of things that would really kind of step me back into that mentality. And when I was surveying one week, I remember going up to a med-surg floor and just kind of walking around the nurses station, and the director was there with me. I can't remember who else was there. Surveyors are always followed by a whole covey of folks. And I went to go talk to the unit secretary and, just kind of ask her some questions about what she did. And she said, well, I'm just a unit clerk. And my heart just sank because it reminded me of where I started. And, she saw me as, oh, I'm the here's the dreaded surveyor asking me about my menial work. Like, I'm just a unit clerk. And in my heart, I absolutely just said, hey, I was you, at one point in my career. And so it was very impactful in a way that, it hit me in my world as a surveyor and kind of reminded me of why I was doing what I was doing. And I think that sometimes we all get to that point to a certain extent, but I feel, especially in those supportive roles outside of the bedside care that's being provided.
And where do you think that comes from? Where do you think that mentality of, because you probably have such great perspective, right, doing your work as an assessor, going in and inspecting and surveying different hospitals, and, also being a unit clerk yourself, to hear her say, I'm just a unit clerk. Where do you think that type of mentality comes from?
I really think that it's a lot of what we allow in from the outside. I think that sometimes we tend to not focus on where we find value in what we do versus how the outside world perceives us and kind of feeds back or reflects how they see the value that we bring. And I think that's a huge part of just job fulfillment in general, right, is to be aware of what you bring to the table and kind of what makes you fulfilled in your work and where you see value. And that's kind of, where I started with being a unit secretary. Was it bottom of the rung in terms of on the med-surg floor? Probably. But I saw it as my job. Like, I helped to run that deadgum nurses station. Like, it was my job to help make sure that my nurses had the easiest possible shifts. Now, were there craptastic shifts? Absolutely. But hopefully it wasn't exclusively my fault. But I saw my role as to, help to alleviate any unnecessary craziness for the nurses that were doing the bedside work and, not taking their lunch breaks or, helpfully not interrupting them with needless things. It was everything that I could do to help make their day better. In my view, I started as a unit secretary in college. For a college kid, I had the perfect hours. I worked from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. I'd square out my classes for the day, and I'd go across campus, cross the street, and be at work. I could work as much as I wanted, as a full-time. I worked full-time, so I couldn't work too much over my full-time hours. But, I could pick up a couple of shifts extra here and there, kind of putting myself through college. That was absolutely valuable. I got a great start in learning how to train other people and really develop my interpersonal skills. As a 19-year-old college kid working with doctors, really helped me to develop both those interpersonal skills and a little bit of a thick skin. So, it's looking at, again, focusing on what are the positives that can come out of this. Is it absolutely where you want to be in 20 years? Maybe not, but what can you pull out of that experience now to help you build upon later?
And so if you take that introspective action and you say, is this where I want to be in 20 years? And your answer is no. What advice would you have for people to feel unstuck in their career and try to navigate a new path for themselves in healthcare?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that you can do, whether you're in healthcare or you're in another industry, you have to figure yourself out first. Again, you have to know what makes you happy and what makes you fulfilled before you can find that in a job. And one of the things, and again, this is kind of outside the box, but one of the absolute best personality tests that I've found is the Enneagram. It's spelled ENNEAGRAM. You've probably heard of DISC or Myers-Briggs, or you've seen some of those personality questions come through in like an online job application. A lot of those job applications have started to incorporate some personality tests. But I've found that the Enneagram is best for helping me to really dig down into what makes me tick, rather than kind of an overview of or a summary of personality traits that I already know. So it's been really great. I learned about it about a year ago, and have in the last probably 6 months really been digging deeper into what it means to be. So I'm an 8. So they're numbers 1 through 9, and I'm definitely a type 8. So if you go and Google,
is it better the higher you go, or what?
I guess it depends on your perspective. Right? No, it's definitely not on a progressive scale from 1 to 9.
Okay.
But I would totally own that. Be like, absolutely. Then you're going to call me a liar after you Google it. But but no, it really helps to learn, especially about, like, I've had a couple of friend groups. We've taken it and learning more about your friends and what makes them tick. Like, it's just really a great tool. And there's so many resources. I mean, you can search this podcast platform you're on now for Enneagram, and there will be so many Enneagram podcasts that pop up to that kind of help you to learn more about each type. So that's digging really deep into that. But no, I think that Enneagram is a great place to start. If you just don't feel super passionate about one thing or another, it's a great starting point to really help with that self-reflection and see, okay, maybe where can I go from here? You can definitely, once you take that test, and they're free all over the interwebs, like you can just type in Enneagram test and you'll find one. But like Pinterest, you can type in what your type. So I put in type 8, and there's all these, fun infographics of different plays on that particular personality type. So if you just need a place to jump off of, that's a great place to start. And so once you know kind of what makes you tick, you have to kind of figure out, okay, how do I find what will shine a light on those characteristics? So you can absolutely, volunteer, job shadowing, those things you can do. And I know that the audience that we have is probably pretty well established in their careers, but this is definitely applicable to anyone at any point in their career, or when they're just kind of thinking about it. So high schoolers can volunteer and job shadow. As a professional, build your professional networks. LinkedIn is a great place to trade knowledge and experience and just gain insight from other people who, may be in completely different roles than you are, and you aren't able to engage with those types of folks on a day-to-day basis in your current role. LinkedIn is a great place to do that. Look for those kind of job titles or people that may be able to give you a little bit more insight into how they got into their roles. I know that I recently had an individual reach out to me on LinkedIn that has a similar background as I do. I never went to nursing school. I had planned on it coming out of high school, but I didn't have the support around me to really do that. My parents would give me a hard time saying, when you were in preschool, you would, gag when you finger painted. Like, how are you going to see blood? Yeah, I was like, I don't know. I feel like I've matured since preschool, but thank you. So
if you gag at the sight of paint, then blood would be hard.
Yeah, but I am I worked on a med surg floor, so like wounds, I will gawk at wounds all day long. I would not be able to make it as a respiratory therapist, bless you folks who are RTs, but you know, I just can't handle that. But at any rate, but yeah, so
But you know, that's a good point, because you don't necessarily have to change your entire career. There's different levels within your current career that you could use these tools to assess. You know, if you're currently an RT and you want to be the RT supervisor, or if you're currently a lab tech and you want to be the lab director, you could always job shadow or do informational interviews and just ask the people in those, you know, those roles that you aspire to be in, you know, what it's like to be in those roles, so you kind of get a better idea.
Absolutely. You know, one of the greatest things that I've seen around the country and that I've been able to be a part of in my career are those kind of process improvement project groups. When I first started in on those, it was more than 10 years ago. But I think they've really taken off to where it's not such a foreign concept anymore. But the idea behind different roles coming together to examine a process or work on a project, it really helps people to understand what things that other roles have to deal with. You may, you know, a nurse may be working on or working within the same process like a patient discharge. But I mean, how many people do you have working to get a patient discharged? You've got respiratory that's probably trying to wean them off O2. You've got labs that need to come back. You have case management that's maybe involved trying to get that patient where it needs to go, whether it be post-acute or home health or anything like that. So those types of things really help you to have a little bit of a perspective into what other folks within your same processes but different roles kind of have to deal with. I think that's a great opportunity, you know, with where you are, and all it takes is, you know, looking at your organization. You know, do we have those sorts of things in place, or is that something that I can go to my supervisor and say, hey, next project that we have to work on, I'd love to be a part of it. So just those kind of little things can definitely help you to learn more about you and what you feel like will help you to become less stuck and really to help you move onward and upward in your career. And to that end, you know, finding a mentor. I know that you guys have talked about mentors in the past. It's a huge, huge, huge thing that I've heard throughout this podcast. And I had an absolutely amazing mentor in my first job out of college who gave me absolutely every opportunity that she could to help develop my knowledge and experience, because I was so young. I was just, and luckily for me, I stayed, I call it the hospital I grew up in, because I started working there when I was 19, and I think when I left I was 24. And she gave me absolutely every opportunity to professionally develop with different trainings, different courses, different exposures. It was absolutely necessary to, or at least I see it as, it was key in getting me to where I am today. And she still likes to pawn off that acknowledgement onto me, saying, oh, well, you did it all. And I'm like, no, I would not. I absolutely would not have had that opportunity had you not given it to me. So, yeah, definitely looking at where you are, what makes you tick, and then deciding, is it going to get you to where you want to be? Is your current role going to get you there? If not, what is it going to take? Do you need an advanced degree, maybe a specific certification? Sometimes it's as easy as starting to work toward and ask for, because those are key, right? Those two things, work toward and ask for additional job responsibilities, because just asking for additional job responsibilities isn't necessarily going to, make your supervisor say, oh, yeah, sure, but you can't, you're not doing what you already should be doing. So working toward being able to ask for those things and earning your supervisor's confidence, is definitely an easy thing to help move you in the right direction. So I do have to talk about kind of where I started. I know we talked about when I was working as a unit secretary. One of the things that I know that Stephanie, you and I have discussed before, is getting an in healthcare, right? So as a non-clinical person, how do you get into working in a hospital? And it's sometimes it's pretty difficult. I remember I'd gone to CNA training. I spent that time. I did my clinicals. I took my test. I had my little card to prove it. But for the life of me, I could not get a job in a hospital, in a nursing home. It was just not happening. And I was like, is it impossible? Like, do I need to call the president? Like, how do I get a job in a hospital? And what happened was I worked at an electronics store, and I was a cashier, and somebody walked up to me, a lady that shall not be named to protect her identity.
Oh, goodness.
No, she was great.
I'm very interested now.
No, she was great. I just don't want people banging down her door to be like, it's your doing. No, but
it's like Olivia Pope. The Olivia Pope of healthcare. Where is she?
Her name's Shelly. And she came to my line, and I don't remember what she bought. Like, I'm not that, I don't have that photographic memory, but she came to my line. She's still had her badge on. She had her scrubs on, and I being my outgoing personality, I just said, "Hey, where do you work?" And she told me, and I said, I have my CNA, and I just can't, seem to get any experience. I want to go to nursing school, but I can't, get an in. And she said, well, actually, we're looking for a unit secretary to work from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. She's like, here's my phone number, or here's my nurse manager's number. Give her a call tomorrow. And I lived happily ever after. I gave her a call, and within a couple of weeks, I was hired. And I had already gone through the process of applying to the hospital and never heard a peep. But it just took that one conversation to say, oh, this is my plan. This is where I want to go. But I'm having trouble. What are your thoughts? And so that kind of goes back to just that informal networking to say, can I have a conversation with you? What did you do? And it's really key to helping to open those doors that you may not know even exist. It may look like a wall or a bookcase, but it's one of those hidden doors. So you just kind of got to push on a little bit. But, yeah, I think that for me, it's been key to really think about where do I want to go, and that's to say it hasn't necessarily stayed the same throughout my career. Starting off in in a frontline kind of role, such as a CNA or unit secretary, you think, okay, do I want to be a nurse, or do I want to be a nurse manager, or what's the ultimate goal? Well, for me, kind of moving up the way I went, I'm non-clinical. I tell people I don't have any initials behind my name yet. I will here in about a month or 2 months. But it kind of would try to build up in me this justice, a case of the justice. Say, well, I don't have the initials behind my name to really get me to where I want to go. So then, okay, what did I do? I tried to figure out the initials that I needed to get me where I wanted to be. And for me, it really took a little bit of introspective, like, okay, what's the ultimate goal? Well, I want to be in the C-suite at a hospital or a health system. And, okay, what do I need to get me there? Well, I started on my master's in business administration, and thankfully, finally, 7 years later, I will be graduating in December. And that I mentioned the 7 years is to say, I got derailed a little bit, but I'm making it happen. And even during the course of finishing up that piece of my career development, my career aspirations have changed. And it's not to say that that MBA won't help me, in my current role and where I go eventually, but just from where I started, absolutely has evolved from that starting point. So I think that it can absolutely, kind of change and move along, but keeping an eye on where you want to go and having a plan in place.
I think those are really good points. And congratulations on your degree and all the hard work that you've put into that. That's an awesome achievement. And I think it's important
Thank you.
No, I know how hard that is. So 7 years or 10 years or 100 years, at least you are, getting over the finish line. And just for our listeners out there, this is like a cyclical process, especially if you're early in your career, or even if you feel like I'm towards the middle or end of my career. You'll constantly be evaluating where you are in your career and the job that you're doing and the job title that you have versus what you want to be doing for the next 5, 10, 20 years of your life, as long as you're working. And so it's not a process where it's like, okay, I've done all my networking and I'm done, I have a job. You'll continue to network. You'll continue to keep your resume updated. You'll continue to meet new people, and then you'll continue, if you want to advance in your career and develop the things that you're going to be doing next. So it's kind of a cycle. It's kind of a cyclical thing, so you don't ever have to be stagnated or feel stuck. Now, if you get the perfect job and you have the perfect title and you feel, this is what I want to do until I retire, that's great. And I think then your role becomes being the best at that, going to all the conferences, talking to people, publishing, doing research, whatever you can do to be the best of the XYZ that you are in that field. So I think those are all great points. And so as we wrap up the conversation, I love to always leave our guests with advice that are actionable things that they can walk away from our podcast with and help them in their professional lives. So what recommendations do you have of things that you use, whether it be reading material or websites? I know you've already given us the great Enneagram test or maybe apps that you use that you can leave our listeners with.
Yeah, there's so many things, but I think the practice that has really helped me both personally and professionally to kind of give me the start that I need every day is, I know this sounds a little bit crazy, but about a little over a year ago, I looked at, okay, what time am I waking up every day, and pushing that back an hour. So I was waking up at like 6 and saying, okay, I'm going to allow myself 1 hour in the mornings to kind of have that calm before the storm. I have 3 little boys that I have to get up and move in and get to school, and everything, especially during the whole distance learning thing, was key to kind of having a little semblance of control over my day. So having a practice to really focus on how you're going to structure your day. So for me, that was, I wake up at 5, I make my coffee, I sit down with my planner, and I say, okay, what meetings do I have today? What do I absolutely need to get done, whether it be for work or school or the kids, and kind of having that starting point. And then looking at, what am I grateful for today? So 5 things, 5 kind of gratitude points for the day to say, we may not have gotten to bed on time last night. The dogs maybe woke me up in the middle of the night, so it's like kind of a rocky start. But what am I grateful for today that will kind of help to reframe my day as I get it started? So that kind of focus on kicking off your day every morning has been absolutely key for me.
And for the listeners that want to reach out to you for additional information, or like you said, you had a person reach out to you on LinkedIn, how can listeners contact you after this podcast?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Kendra Lange, Lange. I got blue blazer you'll see in this podcast, I think, is the same picture. Or you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn, and my is Lange, Klange, Speaks, Speaks. That's where I kind of post a lot of my personal development kind of thoughts and places that I'm going. When back when we were allowed to travel on a regular basis, a lot of my travel days are there, kind of documented. I focus a lot on. I know there's probably a lot of moms in the audience, working moms in the audience. I focus a lot on some of the things that come along with being a kind of career-minded mom. So yeah, you can find me Facebook, LinkedIn is more kind of the the personal development journey, and then LinkedIn is more geared toward the professional aspects of my jam.
Well, thank you for joining me today on this episode, Kendra. It's very enjoyable to talk to you. And thank you to our listening audience for tuning in to today's show with our special guest, Kendra, who has shared the keys to mastering the art of career development. If you like what you've heard today and you want to listen to some of our previous shows, I direct you to directimpactbroadcasting.com, Apple, Spotify, Google, all of your normal podcasting platforms. Please remember to email us at directimpactbroadcasting.com, to learn more about this topic and others, or to be a guest on our show. You can follow me at Stephanie Whitehead on all of my social medias, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And please stay tuned next week where we'll have another amazing episode of Elaborate Topics. And until then, have a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Elaborate Topics, where your hosts discussed relevant strategies for laboratory professionals. Please subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and listen to us on directimpactbroadcasting.com. Stay tuned for another episode with information you can use to excel in your laboratory career.